All right. Hi everyone, it's 5:03 p.m. on the 24th of February 2026. I'm Chris Gibbs, the Shire President, and I'm declaring the meeting open at 5:03. So I'd like to advise the following. The Yorkshire Council acknowledges the Balladong people of the Noongar Nation, who are the traditional owners of the country where this meeting is being held, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water, sky and culture. We pay our respects to all these people and their elders, past, present and emerging. In accordance with Regulations 14I and 14J of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, notice is given that this meeting is being video and audio recorded to facilitate community participation and for minute-taking purposes. By being present at a meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be recorded. Audio recordings are published on the Shire's website following the meeting and may be released upon request to third parties. Members of the public are reminded that in accordance with Section 6.16 of the Shire of York Local Government Council Meetings Local Law 2016, nobody shall use any visual or vocal recording device or instrument to record the proceedings of council without the written permission of the presiding member. I wish to draw attention to the disclaimer notice contained within the agenda document and advise members of the public that any decisions made at the meeting today can be revoked in accordance with Regulation 10 of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996. Therefore, members of the public should not rely on any decisions until formal notification in writing from the Shire has been received. Any plans or documents in agendas and minutes may be subject to copyright, and the express permission of the copyright owner must be obtained before copying any copyright material. 1.3 is standing orders. There are no changes to standing orders. 1.4 is announcement of visitors, and we have no visitors. Councillors, 1.5, are there any declarations of proximity interest on any of the items in tonight's agenda? There are none. 1.6, councillors, are there any declarations of financial interests in tonight's items? There are none. 1.7, disclosure of impartiality. Councillors, are there any impartial interests for tonight's items? And there are none. Thank you. Attendance. Chris Gibbs, the Shire President. Councillor Denise Smythe is the Deputy Shire President. Councillor Elaine Ashford is here, and so is Councillor Monique Hutchinson. Councillor Kevin Pike is here. Councillor Kevin Trent is here, and Councillor Melissa Welsh is here. I have Alina Behan, the Temporary Chief Executive Officer. I have Annika Burleson, the Acting Executive Manager of Corporate and Community Services. I have Rebecca Palumbo, the Acting Executive Manager, Infrastructure and Development Services. I have Vanessa Green, Council and Executive Support Officer, and I have Emma Hannington, Council Support Officer. I have no apologies and I have no leaves of absence previously approved. The number of people in the gallery at the commencement of the meeting is... Do we know? There are 26 people in the gallery at the commencement of the meeting. Section 3 is questions from previous meetings. Response to previous questions taken on notice, there are none. Response to unasked questions from the previous meeting, there are also none. Which brings us to public question time. Public question time is conducted in accordance with the Local Government Act 1995 and regulations. In addition to this, the Shire's Local Government Council Meetings Local Law 2016 states, 6.7, other procedures for question time for the public. 1, a member of the public who wishes to ask a question during question time must identify themselves and register with a council officer immediately prior to the meeting. 2, a question may be taken on notice by the council for a later response. 3, when a question is taken on notice, the CEO is to ensure that A, a response is given to the member of the public in writing, and B, a summary of the response is included in the agenda of the next meeting of council. 4, where a question relating to a matter in which a relevant person has an interest is directed to the relevant person is to A, declare that he or she has an interest in the matter, and B, allow another person to respond to the question. 5, each member of the public with a question is entitled to ask up to 2 questions before other members of the public will be invited to ask their questions. 6, where a member of the public provides written questions, then the presiding member may elect for the questions to be responded to as normal business correspondence. 7, The presiding member may decide that a public question shall not be responded to where A, the same or similar question was asked at a previous meeting, a response was provided, and the member of the public is directed to the minutes of the meeting at which the response was provided. B, the member of the public uses public question time to make a statement, provided that the presiding member has taken all reasonable steps to assist the member of the public to phrase the statement as a question. Or C, the member of the public asks a question that is offensive or defamatory in nature, provided that the presiding member has taken all reasonable steps to assist the member of the public to phrase the question in a manner that is not offensive or defamatory. 8, a member of the public shall have 2 minutes to submit a question. 9, the council by resolution may agree to extend public question time. 10, where any questions remain unasked at the end of public question time, they may be submitted to the CEO, who will reply in writing and include the questions and answers in the agenda for the next ordinary council meeting. And 11, where an answer to a question is given at a meeting, a summary of the question and the answer is to be included in the minutes. And I will commence public question time at 5:09 p.m. So what we look at first is written questions from the current agenda, and we did not receive any. So now we'll move to public question times. And what I'd like to do, everyone, is first of all take questions from people who have questions about items that are on tonight's agenda. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask relating to tonight's agenda? There are none. And sounds like there might be one. If you could just go to the podium and state your name and then ask your question.
Hi everyone. I'm Ingrid Stanway. I live out in Mount Hardy. Now this is regarding the temporary accommodation policy tonight. I've got 2 questions. Sorry, I'm not good at public speaking. The first question is about the existing building permit that's been put on the policy. If you want to try and get a temporary accommodation permit, why is it stipulated that we must have an existing building permit in place prior to application? Personally, I think people who are in hardship situations can't do that. They probably won't be able to.
You've got your question.
Okay. Second one.
So hold on. Would you like me to take them one at a time?
Oh, whatever.
Yeah. So the answer to the first question is difficult because the item is yet to come up tonight. So we don't know 100% for sure how the policy itself is going to shape up. It would be more appropriate to answer that question on behalf of council once I know how the policy shapes up. What's your second question?
In respect to the tiny houses on wheels, it's stating in the policy that there has to be services, etc., to be safe and hygienic, etc. But most tiny houses, in my experience, are self-sufficient or self-contained. Has that been taken into consideration?
That's a good question. Again, we're looking at the policy tonight, but for more context on that, I would like to pass across to the administration. So I'll hand the control over to the temporary CEO.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll make some comments on that and also pass on to our... I will make some comments on that, but also pass on to our acting EMIDS for some further details. So under the legislation, the local government is allowed to put any conditions that are reasonable and lawful as attached to that as well. And certainly the requirement for an appropriate effluent system is one of ours. And I'll pass that on to our EMIDS for any additional detail there.
Thank you, through the chairs. So, as our temporary CEO said, the legislation enables the local government to put in place conditions that address health and safety issues. Our approach in the drafting the policy has been that whilst this is temporary accommodation, it is temporary for a period of 24 months and it would be appropriate to have appropriate services in place. So power, water, cooking, laundry, effluent disposal, waste and rubbish. So we've taken the approach that for a period of 24 months, they are important services to be provided.
Thanks for your questions. Do I have any more questions from the gallery? Darlene, you'd like to ask a question?
As that was just answered, there was one particular thing in there about power. The Shire doesn't actually have any jurisdiction to say whether you have to have power or not, I believe. You can live off grid, or you could not even have power. You could have...
Darlene, what's your actual question?
I just want to know why the Shire is bringing the power issue into the equation.
The requirement to have power to
Yes.
site? Okay,
Yes.
I will pass that to the temporary CEO for a response.
And thank you through the chair. The requirement around services has just been answered.
Thanks,
And-
Darlene. Are there any further questions? Kate, did you have a question?
I have a question, but not about tonight's agenda.
That's okay.
Is that all right? Hi, I'm Kate Morris. I have a question, and I'll give you this later. 17 weeks ago, I sent an email regarding an illegal caravan park here within the Shire of York. I spoke to somebody. They told me to send an email. The illegal caravan park is still operating as of today, and I still have not received a response to my email.
So your question is?
How is this going to move forward with this illegal caravan park still operating within the Shire?
Okay, thank you. I will pass that over to the temporary CEO. Can I ask who your email was addressed to?
Records,
Thank
which
you
is
very
who they
much.
told me to.
Okay.
Thank you through the chair. I don't have an answer for you tonight, but we will look into that tomorrow and get a response back to you within the week.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. Are there any further questions from the gallery? There does not appear to be. So no one outside is going to ask a question. Do you want to quickly check, just in case? Mrs. Palumbo is just checking the overflow area. Okay, in that case, I will close public question time at 5:16 p.m. and we will move on. Thanks, everyone. Section 5 is applications for leave of absence, and there are none. Section 6, we have presentations. So we don't have any petitions tonight. 6.1. 6.2, we don't have any presentations tonight. But 6.3, we do have 3 deputations tonight. Okay, so a deputation is where a member of the public, a community member, gets to put a point of view across on anything that they are passionate about. It's usually related to items that are on the agenda, but it doesn't have to be. The limit is 10 minutes. We will keep a timer for everyone and we'll give you a warning at the 9-minute mark so you know to wrap up. Please note that deputations may not include questions for council, but council may ask questions of the person who's presenting the deputation. So, 6.3.1, Pam Heaton, on behalf of Staying in Place, York and Surrounds. Pam, you have a deputation for us. And a timer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This
Thanks,
does feel strange being on the other side of the counter, as it were. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pam Heaton. I would like to take a few minutes to present you with information regarding a new business that is operating in our town. Staying in Place, York and Surrounds, I represent this organisation as I am the chairperson on the Management Committee. We are a community-led, accredited, not-for-profit organisation supporting seniors to live independently and actively within their own homes and communities across York and the Wheatbelt. Our philosophy? is centred on independence, inclusion and community belonging. Our model of care emphasises social connection, access to services and participation in community life. York has a population of approximately 3,500 residents, with a higher proportion of older adults compared with the state averages. According to the 2021 census of folk living in York, and I gave you that little bit of information there so I don't have to read it all out. But as you can see, in all cases, the percentage of seniors living in York is higher than the state average. There is an obvious need to cater for the seniors in our community. Staying in Place does this by working with a provider called Homemade, by working with Mabel, an organisation which registers care workers, and with a group of volunteers who form a management committee. Our staff consists of one coordinator, one admin assistant, and we are soon to advertise for a second coordinator. We currently have 25 clients, all of whom have received a support at home package, which is part of the federally run aged care system. Of these clients, 3 live in Northam and the remaining live in York. These clients receive support from the 31 registered care workers in the form of gardeners, domestic staff, drivers, social workers, occupational therapists, IT support and palliative care. And why do we exist? The York Hospital has beds for between 7 to 10 patients only. The lodge can cater for a limited number of folk. Balladong's occupancy rate is getting close to full and they have a wait list. This leaves a huge gap in the field of care York can give folk who live here, hence Staying in Place. There are 45 rural towns in WA where Staying in Place is active. 98% of these are run through their CRCs. There are 2 independent Staying in Place, York and 2J, which are run by the volunteers who form the management committees. There is now 1 new Staying in Place that has started up in South Australia. While we meet most of the needs of our clients, to provide social activities is challenging, as York does not have a community centre. Running a growing business as we do, we are placed in the difficult position of not having a base, an office, a central location where folk can go for information, assistance and help in navigating the aged care sector. Staying in Place does not have the funds to pay the exorbitant rentals asked by property owners in Avon Terrace, so we continue searching for a property that the organisation can afford. A community centre would meet the needs of not only Staying in Place, but all organisations who are involved in the running of their clubs, their sporting events, social, well-being and physical needs that exist in all communities. I present this information to you, councillors and staff, so that you are aware of the tsunami of need coming our way. Seniors do exist. Seniors have needs that our existing accommodation will not be able to meet in the future. Therefore, looking after folk in their own home makes sense. Staying in Place assists seniors to stay in their homes, but there is life outside of the home, and meeting the social challenges is difficult when there is no centre in our town that will cater for social connections. social isolation can become a real health issue and can lead to depression. I have working knowledge of 2 community centres, Esperance and Mount Barker. These centres operate as a focus for all town activities, preventing social isolation, and are wonderful, active facilities. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that the organisation staying in place that exists in our town, that works for the well-being of all seniors, is successful. But we face challenges. To date, we have not been able to solve all of these challenges. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Heaton. Council, are there any questions for Mrs. Heaton? If you wouldn't mind staying at the podium, Mrs. Heaton. Just in case. Yes, Councillor Trent.
Your organisation, is it an incorporated body?
Yes.
With an ABN?
We are a not-for-profit organisation.
Thank you.
And yes, we have an ABN.
Okay. Mrs. Heaton, have you or do you have any applications in with the Shire of York for any form of assistance?
To date, no.
Okay. Thank you,
But
Council.
I just wanted the folk to be aware of the business.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any other questions? Okay, thanks very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.3.2 is a deputation regarding item SY002-02/26, which is our amendment to Health Policy H3 temporary accommodation, and Mrs. Darlene Barrett will be presenting a deputation.
My name is Darlene Barrett, and this is my deputation to the Shire of York Council. Thanks for your opportunity to speak. I appear today regarding the proposed policy affecting tiny homes, caravans and temporary accommodation within the Shire. This matter directly impacts vulnerable members of our community and warrants careful, lawful and consultative consideration before adoption. At the previous meetings, Council and CEO expressed a commitment to working collaboratively with community and to support suicide prevention initiatives, housing instability, a significant contributor to mental health distress. In the context of our current housing crisis, any policy affecting temporary or alternative housing options must be approached with transparency, compassion and meaningful consultation. So I've just got to figure out how to get this down. While Section 2.72 of the Local Government Act 1995 provides councillors with responsibility for deeming policy, this situation extends beyond a simple administrative manner. If the proposed policy affects the amendments of the Local Planning Scheme number 3 or 4 or carries into that, because I'm not sure what planning scheme we're under at the moment, Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, I believe is the last one. It comes a strategic planning issue requiring proper stakeholder consultation and adoption. Policy and local laws cannot override existing legislation. Any regulations of tiny homes and caravans or dwellings must clearly align with the policy. There remains a lack of clarity in this policy between a structure affixed to a land requiring building approval that you could live in permanently, therefore not temporary accommodation, and a caravan or a motorhome or movable vehicle on private property which falls under separate regulatory framework, such as the Caravan and Camping Act. The current wording creates inconsistencies and confusion regarding definitions of dwelling and the vehicle-based accommodation. These distinctions must be clearly and lawfully articulated. The proposed 24-month structural report required also raises practical concerns. if a structure is deemed habitable at approval. Automatic revalidation after 2 years, particularly if tied to a requirement for a permanent dwelling permit, does not reflect current housing realities or what the new legislation was made for. Many residents experiencing hardship, including older individuals and those unable to secure finances, cannot reasonably meet such requirements within that time frame. And under legislation, this is not required to build on renewal. It just says that you are able to renew. This policy was originally intended to provide temporary relief during a housing crisis instead of risks reintroducing planning barriers that disappropriately impact those with the fewest housing options. Health and environment considerations must also be properly addressed. Clear written guidance should be developed regarding waste disposal from chemical toilets, septic and plumbing compliance, environmental and public health obligations, safe utility connections. If Council provides practical procedures and clear compliance pathways must be in place. Consultation should occur before policy adoption and not after. Council has formed its position. Meaningful engagement should include planning professionals, environmental health officers, building compliance officers, residents currently living in caravans or tiny homes, community members experiencing housing hardship. These are already numerous tiny homes, or there are already numerous tiny homes within the Shire. Precedents do exist. Any regulatory framework must be workable, legally sound and compassionate. At my previous deputation, I raised serious concerns regarding misleading and incorrect information that has been provided not only to me but to other members of the community. Regrettably, most of these issues remain unresolved. The same misunderstandings and misinterpretations continue to circulate, and elements of those different elements of the current policy appear to rely upon those misguided interpretations. The original discussion around any tiny homes and caravans was focused on temporary accommodation during a housing crisis. It was not intended to redefine permanent residential development, nor reopen broader planning scheme matters that had already been identified as separate issues. However, the current draft policy appears to conflate the two distinct concepts. Permanent residential developments regulated under planning and building legislation, and temporary living under the intended to provide interim relief during hardship. Planning considerations were previously removed from the discussion in recognition that they were creating confusion and unnecessary barriers, yet now it appears to have been reintroduced indirectly through policy language and structural requirements. This blending of permanent planning controls with temporary accommodation framework make this policy unclear, inconsistent and difficult to interpret. It is also regulating temporary hardship accommodation as though it were a long-term subdivision or a development. If this is a temporary living policy, it should be drafted clearly and narrowly to reflect the purpose. If it is a planning amendment, then it must follow proper statutory planning process, including formal consultation. It can't be both. The continued introduction of planning controls in what was intended to be a temporary hardship measure raises a fundamental question. Why is the Shire persisting in bringing planning provisions back into a matter that was explicitly separated from planning scheme amendment? Councillors were elected to act in the best interest of the community. Decisions of this magnitude affecting people experiencing homelessness, financial hardship and mental health vulnerability require direct engagement with those most impacted. I respectfully request that the Council pause this process to undertake proper consultation, clearly align the policy with the existing legislation, clarify definitions and ensure that the final framework is lawful, practical and humane. For the record, I purposely put incorrect information into the letter I wrote to you, Mr. President, and I apologise for that. But the reason why I put it in is because you were elected to make the right decision for the community. You were also unhappy, and I'm saying this really to all the councillors, you were also unhappy with the way things were running. That's why you came onto council. Sorry, I've got to find out where I am. Where things were going in order to represent the community. You are unfortunately going to have to do the homework and the due diligence and not just take someone's word for everything in everything that they know. You would have found the words best practice. It's a good idea to talk to those who are living the experience. The group that you talked about, inclusion, ability, access thing, not one member would know about living today's climate facing homelessness. Bo, who's up next, who has been going around and round in circles with the same misinformation for weeks, same dramas I had with when I was dealing with the policy, dealing with this situation. This policy adds more and doesn't clear up what twice now we have already dealt with. We must get this right, legally and morally. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Barrett. If you could just stay at the podium for a second, just in case. Council, are there any questions for Mrs. Barrett on her deputation? There are none? Okay, thank you very much. Item 6.3.3, Boaz Pardo will present a deputation regarding the same item, SY002-02/26, which is the amendment to Health Policy H3, temporary accommodation. Mr. Pardo.
Okay, I thought I didn't have time, so... Apologise for the delays. Okay, deputation concerns with Shire of York temporary accommodation policy. My name is Boaz Pardo. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Council. I raise the following concerns regarding inconsistencies between the current policy and Western Australian legislation. 1. Section 3.1, application requirements. The policy states applications will only be considered where current building permit is in place. Under the Caravan Parks and Camping Ground Act, there is no absolute requirement that a building permit must exist before an application can be considered. The Act allows local government to assess and impose conditions where appropriate. This restriction may also unfairly exclude residents facing temporary hardship, for example, serious illness, and I would like to bring my personal situation, which is I previously have had cancer, and I might have cancer during my temporary residence, who short-term accommodation permit under recent regulatory amendments, including the 2024 changes, allowing longer stay with approval. Point 2, I want to point out, Section 3.3, notification of adjoining owners. The Act does not require adjoining owner notification for caravan licensing. Licensing is a health and safety function separate from planning under the Planning and Development Act or Local Government Planning Scheme 3. The whole purpose of these measurements was to bypass planning approval. Section 3.4, suitable facilities. The term suitable cooking and laundry facilities is unidentified and therefore subjective. Minimum facility standards are already pre-described under the regulations. Any additional requirements should be clearly referred to specific legislation or Australian standards provisions. Section 3.5, assessment and approval. This new policy assigns assessment and approval to an environmental health officer alone with no input from councillors. Under the Act, licensing decisions are made by the local government or properly delegated authority, not solely by a single department. 5, site inspections and entry powers. Inspection powers must comply with Local Government Act 1995, including Section 3.31 and 3.32 regarding lawful entry, notice, consent, or warrant. What I would recommend, inserting wording confirming inspections will comply with the statutory entry provisions. Point 6, Section 3.7, road use reference. The policy refers to Road Traffic Vehicle Regulations 2014. Road registration status is separate from the caravan licensing under the Caravan Parks and Camping Ground legislation. The policy appears to conflate these frameworks. Conclusion: the policy contains provisions that exceed or misstate the statutory authority, duplicate or conflict with state legislation, use vague or undefined terminology. I respectfully request that the Council review the amendment policy to ensure consistency with the current Western Australian law and protocol fairness.
Thanks very much, Mr. Pardo. If you could stay at the podium for a second. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Pardo on his deputation? Okay, thank you very much for your deputation. We'll move on to section 6.4, which is delegates' reports. 6.4.1 is Councillor Denise Smythe, and she's the Deputy Shire President, and she has attended those events since the last OCM. Number 7, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. There's a recommendation there. This is to accept the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 16th of December 2025.
So moved, Mr. President. Councillor Trent.
Councillor Trent to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Welsh is seconding. Is anyone speaking against the recommendation? No one is. We'll take a vote, please. And the minutes are passed unanimously 7-0. Thank you, Council. Section 8. There are announcements by presiding member. Those are the items, the meetings and events that I attended since the last OCM. We're up to the officers' reports. So, item SY002-02/26 is the amendment to Health Policy H3, temporary accommodation. There's a recommendation. That's the recommendation you're being asked to vote on, Council. So before we get to that, may I please ask Council if they have any points of clarification or questions? I have some. So I would like to ask if Council adopts a policy, in this case this policy, and it is found to possibly contravene any other legislation, what would be the process by which to amend that?
So, through the Chair, it's the policy can come back to Council at any time if there's a requirement or a change that's been found to be made. So, on discovering that, we can just bring it back.
Are there any other questions from Council? I haven't. Sorry, you didn't hear the response, Mrs. Marwick. We will. Thank you. We will speak up. Thank you. Just to communicate that, the temporary CEO outlined that if there was anything amiss with the policy in regards to other legislation, it would come back to council for review. Okay. I have another question, just in general terms, and I understand that different applications have different requirements. With the requirement for a building permit for the temporary accommodation, what are the basic components that someone might need to provide in order to get a building permit?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll pass that on to our EMIDs, who will have that detail.
Thank you. Through the chair. So for a building permit to be issued for a dwelling, which is what is in thing, so there is requirements under the National Construction Code and the Building Act in regards to the quality of plans, the certification, and there's also a choice for people to either have it privately certified or we can provide the certification. But a building permit is a permit to construct, so you're talking about all the full construction requirements in order to legally build a house.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Hutchinson, you have a question.
Thank you, President Gibbs. If I understand that correctly, if somebody wants to get a building permit, does that mean that they would need things like the draft plan and engineer and all the extra costs that comes with that? And they have to have a clear insight as to what they're going to be wanting to build?
Thanks for the question. I'll pass that to the temporary CEO.
Thank you. Through the chair. So for a standard application and a development approval, there's two parts to it. So so I have a very small voice, I'm sorry. So through under any... So this is the right distance for that. If I get too close, it gets really fuzzy. But so through any development approval process, you need planning application. So at the time that you are looking, if it is a building, you would be outlining exactly where on the site you want to locate it, and there'll be a rough understanding of what that building looks like. When you move to the building process, then you need significant detail, and yes, you would be looking at engineers' certifications, etc., and there would be costs associated with that, as you've described. Would you like further detail? I can pass that on to our EMIDs, or is that sufficient? Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further questions on the item? There are no further questions. Do I have a mover for the item? Councillor Smythe, you are moving. Do I have a seconder for the item?
I'll move the item to get it on the table.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for the item? Councillor Welsh, you are seconding. Councillor Hutchinson, you have your hand up.
Yes, President Gibbs, I wish to adopt this policy with an amendment.
You'd like to propose an amendment?
I'd like to propose an amendment, yes, please.
Thank you. Can you please outline what your amendment is?
The amendment is that, as amended, removing the policy reference to the requirement for a building permit in the initial 24-month period be added to point 1.
Okay, that is your proposed amendment.
Yes, it is.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Hutchinson's amendment? I do. Councillor Ashford, can you say that on the microphone, please?
Councillor Ashford seconds.
Okay. Do I have anyone wishing to speak against this amendment? I should remind Council that at this point in time, this is where you would put your hand up if you're not in support of this amendment, whether you're going to speak against it or not.
Thanks, Councillor Gibbs. I'm not currently in support of this amendment to this policy.
Thanks, Councillor Welsh. So it will go to debate. So this is what will happen, everyone. What we've just done is the item is on the table, but that's not what we're going to be debating right now. What we're going to be debating right now is Councillor Hutchinson's proposed amendment to remove the permit requirement for the initial 24 months. Okay, as written on the screens there. So there's an order to debate for this. Councillor Hutchinson will go first. And as the seconder, Councillor Ashford, you have the opportunity to speak second. Councillor Welsh, as the person who's speaking against it, you have the opportunity to speak against it after that happens. After that, I'll ask for any other councillors speaking for, any other councillors speaking against, and when we have exhausted that, we go back to Councillor Hutchinson for a closing argument. Councillors, you have 5 minutes apiece, and you will get a warning at 4 minutes. Okay. So, Councillor Hutchinson, it is over to you.
Thank you, President Gibbs. As councillors, we have an opportunity to stand alongside the other shires that have made the discretionary choice to be supportive and inclusive for their community. We each come from different backgrounds, different experiences of survival, different ways to move forward in life, and different ways to achieve our dreams. Therefore, together, we are able to ensure the best decisions come from hearing each other and remembering that there is more than one way forward for each individual. I come from an experience where I am lucky to have my own home. I have passed the stage of life where I'm still trying to get there, so I need to take a step back and remember what it was like before I reached this step and ask, if I was trying to buy land and build a house in this day and age, what would I hope to be afforded to me? I meet new people who come to town who find our charity and ask, what is York like? We are looking to buy and build. They are impressed by our charity's community spirit, and that is what they're looking for. They are looking for an easy way forward. They are looking for more freedom from the restrictions that come from the everyday living. They are looking for an affordable, easier life, a peaceful place to belong, a place for their children and their grandchildren to belong. They are looking for a supportive community to belong to. Removing the building permit for the initial 24 months offers this support for their way forward, as it shares the following message. In York, we stand by our community. We are supportive in all the different ways forward, that you can build your dream here and you can grow your family with us. I support the intent of this policy. It clearly aims to protect public health, amenity, environmental standards. It also acknowledges that temporary accommodation is sometimes necessary. If we vote to keep the building permit as a condition of approval for the temporary accommodation on land, we may unintentionally conflict with the very purpose of this policy, as we will unintentionally intensify already existing life restrictions to moving forward. In regional WA, construction timelines and costs have changed significantly in recent years. We have seen labour shortages, increased costs across the board, material delays and financing challenges that have all made it harder for residents to move immediately into construction phase. For many families, the sequence is not buy land, get permit and start building. Instead, it is secure land, stabilise living arrangements, finalise finance, engage builder, obtain permit, commence works. This gives support, times and space for an achievable outcome and way forward for the current way of life. Requiring a building permit at the beginning assumes financial and logical readiness that many residents simply do not have. What we are already deciding is this. Do we want temporary accommodation to be accessible as a genuine, transitional option, or only to those who can already afford to commence construction? What about the people who fall outside of this box? The current wording risks excluding families waiting on finance approval, residents impacted by building and living rising costs, residents who have to work away to finance the build. This creates building delays. Individuals transitioning after separation or hardship, locals working towards but not yet ready for formal construction. The policy already caps approval at 24 months. It prohibits tourism use, it requires renewal as a new application, and it allows conditions and compliance monitoring.
1 minute to go. We
are not being asked to weaken standards. We are being asked to consider proportionality as the government action flows best for for everyone when it is in alignment with what is actually able to be achieved. This amendment does not lower standards. It would align the policy with lived reality. I encourage the Council to consider whether our regulatory framework is enabling responsible transition or unintentionally creating barriers at the very moment support is most needed. Thank
you very much, Councillor Hutchinson. Councillor Ashford, you are the seconder for the proposed amendment. You now have up to 5 minutes to speak to it.
Thank you, President Gibbs. I support the amendment.
essentially, in today's climate with housing, I see no opposition. It comes at no cost to council to make the amendment. I feel that it comes from the right, within the climate of the housing at the moment, it comes at the right time where council, I myself, am lenient to that, understanding of different circumstances. We all come from different walks of life. I actually lived in temporary accommodation when we first bought our farmland, and so therefore I have that lived experience also with 2 small children, having to work and settle in and settle children into school, and that was before the crisis. So I have a lived experience and I have an understanding of where people are today. So at no extra cost to the council, I see no relevance, and I have no opposition to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashford. Now, Councillor Welsh, you're speaking against the proposed amendment. Would you like to speak? Thank you, Councillor Welsh. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Councillor Gibbs. In my opinion, and I definitely have empathy for the situation of many in our community, things are tough at the moment in the building industry and with the cost of living crisis. However, I think there is considerable risk to the town site and to our shire in terms of compliance, risk with the monitoring that is required, because I can actually see this policy being used broadly by many, which is great, but the compliance risk and the monitoring, there's also substantial cost still for the applicant to put in an effluent system to manage waste. If they have gone so far as to purchase a block of land, which is a great step, then they need to put in the effluent system to get their application approved. Then that they are intending to go the next step. I do not see the reason why we should not be having a building permit in place in the first instance, so that we are not overloading our admin with extra resource time to check on compliance over that 2-year period where someone has no intention to build a house or can't build a house for reasons, of which there possibly could be many. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Welsh. Would anyone else like to speak for support of the proposed amendment? I will be. So before I go into that, is anyone else planning on speaking against the proposed amendment? Councillor Pike. Okay, so it'll be me next because we've got to go in order, and then I'll come back to you. Okay. All right. So thank you, Council, for your very, very considered points of view on this policy. And I think we need to remember that we are actually adjusting an existing policy. It feels sometimes like we're talking about something that's brand new, but we're actually not. What we're doing is trying to update a policy so that it makes more sense in the current climate. And I think that's the crux of the argument right there. Because to me, looking at this policy has been triggered by announcements made at state level. Okay? Now, those announcements aren't necessarily backed by significant changes in legislation. However, that's kind of what started us off on this journey in the first place. Right? And that was to update policies that we have to reflect an intent. And to me, that's the important part of this, and that is the intent. So I believe if you look at the announcements that have been made to try and ease the burden of housing solutions, part of that intent is to make temporary accommodation something that might be achievable as a temporary solution to longer-term housing. So I agree with Councillor Hutchinson's proposed amendment because I believe that that brings our policy more in line with the intent of what those announcements were. It stays within legislation. We have already heard from the administration, and we know that as legislation moves and as new information comes to light, that we will be able to bring this policy back at the appropriate time and at any time. There is no time limit on when we can address a policy. We could bring it back next month. Okay? I keep coming back to intent when I'm thinking about this, and I believe the intent was to make things easier. Okay? So I'm in support of the of the proposed amendment to remove the requirement for a building permit for the first 24 months. I think it's reasonable for the following 24 months, if reapplied for, there should be plans in place to develop the land, because that also contributes to the overall housing situation that we have in Australia and indeed regional Western Australia. I think that there are many, many reasons, many of which that have already been mentioned in our community and at this table, for reasons why one might need to utilise land that they have for something other than building, whether it is hardship, whether it's taking a breather, whether it's working out what you want to do next, whether it's a situation that has been thrust upon you that you can't do much about, or whether you'd just like to try out the town and see what you think of it before you commit to a build. I think that all of those things are possible by removing the building permit for the first 24 months as proposed in the amendment by Councillor Hutchinson. I don't think that it weakens the policy in any way, shape or form, because if you wanted to build, you'd be doing that anyway. It's not telling people that they can't apply for a building permit. It's not telling people that they can't develop the land, but it's giving people more options in case they would like to have a look around and see what their possibilities are, and particularly if they can't get everything to come together on the timeline the way they would like that to be. I'd like to see those sorts of considerations brought into the policy. So I'm in support of it, and I would ask Council to consider supporting the proposed amendment. Now, Councillor Pike, you wish to speak against? You've got 5 minutes.
To be honest, I don't see the point, the problem having that in. If you're applying for 24 months, not having insufficient sewerage and that kind of thing, I can see it being exposed a little bit, and we can end up with these little tiny houses popping up everywhere, and without any controls and that, it could get messy. So I think having that the building permit in there is that step to, yep, we're going to build, and we're not just going to sit on a block and leave it as it is.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Pike. We're probably coming to the end, but I will check. Councillor Trent, would you like to speak for or against?
I wish to speak for, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Go ahead. Is anyone else going to speak against? Doesn't look like it. Okay, Councillor Trent, please proceed. You have 5 minutes.
Council, applying for a building permit, you've got to go through all of the hoops to get to what you're going to submit, and that takes time. Whether it's 12 months or 14 months or 20 months or even 24 months, it's something which takes time. And if you're just moved in on your tiny home on wheels, you're getting established. And even if you put an application in, there's no guarantee that you would have all in place to move on. So I see no purpose in expecting the person to have an application in for a building permit within that first 24 months, and I support the recommendation, the amendment.
Thanks very much, Councillor Trent. If there's no one else to speak against, then it's over to Councillor Hutchinson for your sum up.
Thank you, President Gibbs. I'm just listening to the risks and of the two councillors who've decided that this policy the amendment doesn't align for you. I wonder if you might have heard some of the whispers that I've heard of late. I've heard that this policy might create land banking, yet it's an owner's choice to do this. Then if they were going to do this, they're going to do it and leave it vacant anyway, and that's existing anyway without the policy and without the amendment. So if someone applies for a regulated temporary accommodation, they are already signalling engagement, not avoidance. Another whisper I've heard about the tiny homes and caravans is it will turn our town into a shanty town. This is fear-mongering and creates division and exclusion. This term shanty town implies high density, no infrastructure, no sanitisation and no oversight. None of those conditions exist in the policy. There's very strong conditions that need to be applied with. What we are discussing is temporary accommodation on a private lot with utilities, with inspections, with neighbour notification and a defined end date. Those are not, so Shantytown and our policy is not a comparable scenario. What is being proposed is not informal settlement, it is not unregulated development. No one wants to see unmanaged or visually chaotic development or protecting we want to see protecting neighbourhood character and property values is a legitimate responsibility of our council. That concern deserves to be taken seriously, and it already is within this policy. Another whisper that is on the move is that tiny homes on wheels and caravans in our town will decrease the existing property values and again creates fear and no valid reason. There is no reliable evidence in Australia that a time-limited, approved tiny home or caravan on private land, subject to setbacks, screening and conditions, causes a measurable property devaluation. What does affect property value is unauthorised living, inconsistent enforcement, visual neglect and ad hoc non-compliance. This policy doesn't allow this. The last two of these whispers are out of date. All three do not align with the reality of this policy. I hope they are not true, as thinking like this aligns with division. It's the same thinking that allows a few to rise while pushing others down. Any policy that excludes should not belong in York, even if it is done elsewhere. We are the council, and the Shire of York's values on our website clearly states we achieve together, so we are inclusive. We take ownership, so we own our actions and decisions and how they may impact others. We shape the future with quality outcomes for the community, and we inspire to uplift and to make positive impact for all. This change brings fairness and equality for all, where all can move forward together. Amending this policy will align with our own values and the state government to reduce the housing crisis, with a policy that is inclusive, achievable, that will encourage future town growth and support the community members, including long-time locals who can finally leave the unpredictable rental market, reduce their survival stress and provide for their families in a place they can call their own because they had the extra time to achieve it. It is important to note that a building permit requirement does not manage the risks the policy is primarily concerned with.
1 minute.
Those safeguards remain intact whether or not a building permit has been issued. A balanced approach would be to allow temporary accommodation for the first 24 months without a building permit, provided that the applicant demonstrates genuine intent to pursue lawful dwelling outcome through meeting the other requirements mentioned in the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchinson. That closes the debate on the proposed amendment. So we will put it to the vote. I'm just reminding Council that what we're voting on right now is whether the amendment is being added to the policy and adjusting the policy. We're not voting on the policy itself. We will go back to that after this particular part of the item. So what we're voting on is that, as amended, removing from the policy references to the requirement for a building permit in the initial 24-month period to be added to point 1. Okay. So may I please have those in favour of the amendment? And I have 4. Those against? I have 3. The amendment is passed and will become part of the policy. So what we're back to now, so that everyone knows what's going on, is we've just had that policy amended. So we're now looking at the policy where it does not require the 24-month, the building permit in the first 24 months. So what we already had is it's been moved and seconded. Is anyone speaking against the recommendation for the policy itself, which is on screen now? No one is speaking against the policy. In that case, we will take a vote. So there's the recommendation. Oh no, we've already done that. Yep, it will be up to a vote. So, those for the policy. And we have a unanimous decision of 7-0. There's a second recommendation that with regard to the adoption of fees and charges for the temporary accommodation application fee, Council adopts a fee of $300 for a temporary accommodation application to be incorporated and directs the Temporary Chief Executive Office to give local public notice of the fee. Do I have any questions on that recommendation, Council? I don't. Do I have a mover for recommendation B? Councillor Hutchinson moves. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Trent moves. Is anyone speaking against the recommendation? They are not. Let's take a vote. And recommendation B passes 7-0. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We will move forward. Okay, item SY 003-02/26, the proposed policy for management of vegetation in road reserves. We're having a look at a request to an extension of time to support the development of a new policy on vegetation in road reserves. Let's have a look at the recommendation. There it is. Council, do you have any questions or points of clarification on this one? Councillor Trent.
We're asking for an extension. How far are we from getting to the policy? Are we going to give a 12-month extension or 2 years? Does anyone have any idea?
Thank you very much. I believe it's in the recommendation, but I'll pass it across to the temporary CEO.
Thank you, through the Chair. It is in the recommendation. We initially, when we put this policy to Council, we actually asked for a full 12 months. It was reduced to 6 at Council direction. We now have resourcing issues that are stopping that, but we are committing to do that as soon as possible or at the date in the recommendation.
Councillors, are there further questions? Okay, would anyone like to move the recommendation?
I'm prepared to move the recommendation as printed, Mr. President.
Thanks, Councillor Trent. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smythe.
Councillor Smythe seconds the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Is anyone speaking against this recommendation? No one. Let's take a vote. That recommendation is carried 7-0. Thank you, Council. Our next item. Operational management. Item SY 004-02/26 is operational management of the York Recreation and Convention Centre. This is the report that comes in that was requested by Council, and we're having a look at the report itself, and there's a recommendation there, and the recommendation is basically accepting the report and directing the temporary CEO to provide us with an update in the May OCM. Do I have any points of clarification or questions on the item? I don't. Do I have a mover? Councillor Smythe.
Councillor Smythe moves the recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Trent.
Seconds.
Okay, is anyone speaking against the item? There is no one. Let's take a vote. And that is carried 7-0. Thank you, Council. We'll move to our next item. Okay, so item SY 005-02/26 is a correction to community grant funding acquittal for York Croquet Club Incorporated 2024/25. Fixing up an error in the report, there's a recommendation. Let's have a look at it. Council, that's what you're being asked to vote on there. It's basically a numerical error. Do I have any points of clarification or questions? I do not. Do I have a mover? Councillor Ashford.
Councillor Ashford moves.
Councillor Ashford moves. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smythe.
Councillor Smythe seconds.
Is anyone speaking against the item? There is no one. Let's take a vote. And that is passed 7-0. Thank you, Council. And we'll move forward. So, item SY006-02/26 is the minutes of the annual electors meeting, which was held on the 3rd of February 2026. Council needs to accept those minutes. Let's have a look at the recommendation. There it is, Council. Does anyone have any questions or points of clarification? Do I have a mover?
Councillor Trent moves.
Councillor Trent moves. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hutchinson, you have your hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Hutchinson seconds.
Thank you. Is anyone wishing to speak against this recommendation? There's no one. Let's take a vote. Thanks, Council. That's passed 7-0. The minutes have been accepted. Let's have a look at our next item. Item SY007-02/26 is the financial report for December 2025. So it's the statement of financial activity. Let's have a look at the recommendation there. Council, do you have any clarifications or questions on this item? Councillor Smythe.
I just want to make it known that I did have a series of questions and they've all been answered adequately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smythe. Any other questions? There are none. Do I have a mover?
Councillor Trent moves.
Councillor Trent moves. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Welsh.
Councillor Welsh seconds.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. Is anyone speaking against this recommendation? No one is. Let's take a vote. And that's passed 7, carried 7-0. Thank you very much. Let's move forward, everyone. Item SY008-02/26 is investments for December 2025. We basically have a report on the balance and distribution of investments held by Shire of York. Let's have a look at the recommendation, and there it is. Council, points of clarification or questions on this item? There are none. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Smythe.
Councillor Smythe moves the recommendation.
Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Trent seconds.
Councillor Trent, thank you. Do I have anyone speaking against the recommendation? I do not. Let's take a vote. And that is passed, carried 7-0. Thank you, Council. Moving right along. Item SY009-02/26 is the financial report for January 2026. It's the statement of financial activity, creditors, payment listing and purchasing card transactions to Council for noting. Let's have a look at the recommendation. There's the recommendation. Council, are there any points of clarification or questions? There are none. Do I have a mover? Councillor Smythe.
Councillor Smythe moves the recommendation.
Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Trent second.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Is anyone speaking against this recommendation? No one is. Let's take a vote. And that is passed, carried 7-0. Thank you very much, Council. We'll move to the next item. Item SY010-02/26 is investments for January 2026. distribution of investments, but for January. Let's have a look at the recommendation, Council. Has anyone got any points of clarification or questions? There are none. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Welsh is moving.
Councillor Welsh to move.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ashford.
Councillor Ashford seconds.
Thank you very much. Is anyone speaking against? There is no one. Let's take a vote. And that is carried 7-0. Thank you very much, Council. We'll move forward. Motions of which previous notice has been given. There are none. Section 11 is questions from members without notice. This is where Council can ask some questions if they would like to. There are no takers for questions from members without notice. There's no business of an urgent nature introduced by a decision of the meeting. So we're up to Section 13, and there is a confidential item that we're being asked to discuss and vote on. So I need to move that we close the meeting to the public. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Councillor Trent.
Councillor Trent. Is anyone against closing the meeting? No one is. Let's take a vote, please. That's carried 7-0, and I now need to close the meeting to the public to consider this item. I will be reading out the results of it later on, but there's no need to come back in. You can come back in if you wish. But for the moment, we need to clear the gallery, and thank you very much for your attendance. I will now move that we open the meeting back to the public. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Smythe seconds. Is anyone against opening the meeting to the public? Can we take a vote, please? And the meeting is going to be open to the public with a vote of 7-0. The meeting is open back to the public at the time of 6:21 p.m. We will pause for a moment to see if anyone does come back into the room so that I can read the resolution. It would appear that no one is going to come back in. In that case, can I please have the resolution on the screen to read it up? Okay, so reading this one, for item SY 011-02/26. The resolution was moved by Councillor Kevin Trent. It was seconded by Councillor Melissa Welsh, and it was that with regard to outstanding rates and charges payment agreements, Council 1 approves the applications for a payment agreement as presented in Confidential Appendix 1, and 2 notes that any default on the agreements may result in debt recovery action. In favour was the entire Council, which is Gibbs, Smythe, Ashford, Hutchinson, Pike, Trent and Melissa Welsh. No one was against, carried 7-0. And with that, I will thank everyone for attending. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for your passion and your endeavours. Thank you to the administration. And let's close this meeting at 6:23 p.m. Thank you, Council.